Ah, Cuphead. It's hard. Now yes, I know I'm far from the first person to make that observation. However, even today, in 2022, this game still holds up as a tough yet fun, short yet sweet, controller-shattering yet blissfully satisfying experience. And with the DLC having finally released, I decided to finally share my love of this game to the world. And how am I gonna do that? Why? By ranking every weapon in the game, of course. All 9 shots, all 6 supers, and everything in between. Perfectly categorized into this tier list. So, without further ado,
it's on!
Ah, the pea shooter. All reliable, as it were. A fast-firing, decent damage standard shot. Nothing's getting more plain than that, and that makes sense, seeing as it's the weapon you're given at the beginning of the game. However, while its simplicity is good for the start of the game, ultimately its low damage output and general ineffectiveness against moving targets brings its score down by a pretty fair margin. So for that, I'm going to be giving the pea shooter a very reasonable C tier, a nice baseline weapon. Good for the start, but in the end, if you want to beat the game, you're going to have to take a trip over to Pork Rinds to snag our next weapons. The spread shot. I have a love-hate relationship with this thing. You see, it's good. Like, it does really good damage, and its range is short, but not terrible. Now, while I wouldn't recommend it for a fight like Mr. Wheezy or Baroness von Bonbon, or her final phase at least, I can still say with confidence that this is a good shot. So you might be thinking, oh, PK only has one problem with the shot, and even then, he said it wasn't really a huge deal. It's gonna be S tier, right? Well, sorry to all the spread shot fans out there, but the spread shot is only a spread because of its multiple projectiles. And to do all that damage I talked about, you need every shot to hit. And while, yes, it's not necessarily difficult to get up close to your enemies, and it has a really fast firing speed, taking into account things like contact damage, your already minimum HP, and whatever attacks the bosses have in the first place, it can be deceivingly difficult to land all your shots. So, taking everything into account, I'm going to be giving the spread shot a very solid A tier. It's got good damage, but a reasonable handicap. Oh boy, the chaser. Now, let me start off this segment by saying that I know all too well that this is by far the most controversial shot in the game. The casual players love it for its mindless playstyle. However, the pros will pass out cold on the ground, frothing at the mouth from the mere mention of its name. So, what do I think of the shot? Well, it's really good. Not for its damage, keep that in mind, but for the fact that it allows you to focus on the enemy's attacks. And while it may draw out the fights a bit, that subtle extra amount of time is something that way too many people make a huge deal out of. Now, do I think it's better than spread? Personally, I'd put them at the same tier. However, I won't let my own bias cloud my judgment on what is objectively a decent shot. I'm going to be giving it a B tier, purely because it requires less work to use than the pea shooter, and it's actually really effective if you know how to use it. Now, as a man who loves purple, I was very excited to see the lobber in action. So I bought it, went into a level, and discovered it's basically only good against platform bosses. Cagney, Rumor, and of course, Grim. But while it's only good on those types of stages, when it works really well. Like, phase 2 of Grim is a joke with this weapon. And while it has a slower firing speed, that's made up for by it being the second strongest shot in the game. So, with all that in mind, I would give it an A tier. However, it's ultimately dragged down by the fact that it only does viable damage on the platform stages. So I'll give it another B. It was almost an A, but in the end, the range was the only thing holding it back. Ah, the charge shot. The worst and best weapon in the game. I say that because this shot is actually 2 in 1. There's the intended use, which is actually charging it for a second and firing it off. And there's the secondary fire you get from just tapping the fire button. And in case you're wondering, yes, I beat Werner twice with both the charged and uncharged version, and one was certainly easier to use than the other. Let's go over the charged version first. Possibly the most famous shot in the game, because A, it's the strongest, and B, because of its charging mechanic, it's the most unique in the base game. Now, while this weapon doesn't allow for reliable rapid fire, it compensates for that by having the highest damage output of any shot in the game. The charge shot is also definitely much more strategy based than the other shots. Maybe an upcoming one comes close, but we'll get to that. For now, all I can say is that the charged shot is a great choice. In fact, it's how I beat the devil the first time around. So the charged shot gets an easy A tier. Only reason it's not an S? Well, that's because the charge doesn't hold when you dash. Like, seriously, that gets annoying. And now it's time for its little, annoying, painful, horrendous brother. The uncharged shot. Using this thing is like slapping your opponent with a wet spaghetti noodle of depression. Horrible damage, irritating to use, and it's just an all-around awful decision to attempt using it like this. E tier. I'd put it lower, but 1, this is as low as the list goes, and 2, it can quickly become the strongest shot in the game just by waiting a second. But seriously, don't use it like this. And now for the most popular shot in Cuphead, Roundabout. And let me say this now, it lives up to the hype. While it does have good range, just shooting it straight forward, turn around and it's suddenly a screen clear. And you can use that to your advantage. By turning around on some of your shots while shooting the boss up close, you can very easily flood them with damage, making certain shorter fights an absolute joke. Easily the most versatile shot in the game. Now, do I give it an S tier? Well... Yes, I do. Giving this thing anything below even A tier is straight up criminal. If the word peak was a weapon, this would be it. Easiest S tier I've ever given anything. Finally, moving on to the DLC weapons, we start off with the best of the 3. Yep, Crack Shot is the best DLC shot, but is that really surprising? Really good damage with the straight shots, but even if you miss, it's still, well, cracks and homes in on the target. Essentially just being the Giga Chad version of the homing shot. Pretty funny to think how the 4 best shots in the game, at least to me, share a common theme. But again, we'll get to that. So yeah, yet another S tier for Crack Shot. It may be brand new, but man is it incredibly reliable. This and Roundabout are my go-to kit now. Second to last shot here, and coming right after Crack Shot, it's got a lot to live up to. So, what do I think of Converge? It's good. Not great. Converge has 3 primary mechanics: shooting in 3 directions, being able to pierce enemies, and, of course, converging when the lock button is held. It's got pretty good damage, and it's especially useful for targets that take up the screen. Also, it's yellow, so I give it points for that. But while it may sound like I'm going to give this thing a high rating, I'm going to give it a B tier for 2 main reasons. One is that the converging mechanic is actually pretty tricky to use when you constantly have to run around the arena. And 2 is that in comparison to the others, it's just generally not as effective. So while this is a pretty good pick, it really depends on who you're going to be fighting. This B tier ranking isn't in malice, I swear, it's just in objectivity. And finally, the shot at least like a third of you I think have been waiting for. Twist Up. Now, before we begin, let me start off this segment by saying that Twist Up slander will not be tolerated on this channel. And that's because this shot is overhated for what I can tell no reason. Oh, it doesn't shoot straight forward. Aim diagonally. Oh, it's just worse roundabout. How? It has the same damage output when all 3 twisters hit. It's really situational. Not really? Like, I get it. If you just can't aim, like, at all, then it's not for you. But it's actually really versatile, and it can be used for just about any fight. If you're good enough, that is. So yeah, Twist Up is really good, and you're all just bad at aiming. And just in case you're still on the fence about if this shot is effective against multiple bosses, then don't worry. Because the Root Pack, Cagney Carnation, Ruby and Croaks, Baroness Von Bonbon, Beppy the Clown, Rumor Honeybottoms, Captain Brinybeard, Verna Vermin, Phantom Express, Chips Bedigan, Pip and Dot, Hoppus Pocus, Pirouetta, Mangosteen, King Dice the Devil, Glumstone the Giant, Moonshine Mob, Howling Aces, Mortimer Freeze, Chef Saltbaker, and the Angel and Demon can all be dealt with pretty efficiently using Twist Up. I got that first try! Let's go! More than half the bosses in this game, and you still think it's unviable? So yeah, strategy based? Yes. Tricky to aim with at first? Sure. But is it S tier? In my opinion, absolutely. And now, with the shots done, you've probably noticed 2 things. 1 is that there's still a good amount of this video left, and 2 is that when talking about online shots, I neglected to mention one of the most important aspects about them. The EX shots. The EX shots, for those who somehow don't know, are souped up versions of your standard shots that can be used when these cards at the bottom of your screen are built up. And now that you're caught up, I welcome you to what I like to call the EX Shot Lightning Round. I'm going to be ranking these as quickly as I can while still addressing their core attributes. One more thing, I apologize in advance for the amount of Gooby Legrand abuse you're about to see. 3, 2, 1.
You're up!
Pea Shooter. Acts like a Hadouken from Street Fighter. Hits 3 times, does good damage, B tier. Spread. Fires off large pyramids in 8 directions. Tricky to get all of them to hit, but very good if you can get inside the boss with iframes. Another B tier. Chaser. Acts as a contact damage shield for your enemies. You can still get hit though, so be cautious with your distance. Can also be fired off in one go. C tier. Lobber, just a bigger version of the standard fire. Does really good damage though. A tier. Charge, basically a melee attack. A good sized explosion that does high damage. It's a little hard to hit though. B tier. Roundabout, summons a typhoon that bounces around the battlefield. Hits up to 5 times and does really good damage. But disappears when you touch it, which can make it kinda tricky to use. Still A tier though. Crack shot, easily the most unique of the EX shots, creating a small little Saturn turret that shoots 3 projectiles before despawning. Can also be parried into the enemy. A tier. Converge, a huge laser that spreads the whole screen, piercing targets just like the standard shot. Only problem is that it doesn't really do much damage, like at all. D tier. Sorry. Twist up, summons a tornado that spins around the screen, breaks after 5 hits just like Roundabout. And much like Spread, it's really effective if you can get inside the enemy. A tier. Woo! I'll be taking notes, but we're not done yet. With those out of the way, we can get to the real heavy hitters. By saving up 5 of those EX cards, you can use super arts. So you know what? Let's just get into it. After clearing the first mausoleum and setting the legendary chalice free, you unlock Cuphead's first super, the Energy Beam. A horizontal screen wipe that has you dump out an ungodly amount of liquid from your head. This one is definitely Cuphead's most versatile super, as it can be used for attacking multiple targets, extra airtime, and of course, flooding a boss with damage. And personally, I think it's safe to say that this is Cuphead's best super. The other two are good, but this one is guaranteed high damage on top of some quick invincibility. Easy S tier for the Energy Beam. Coming off of offense for a second, next up is your defense. Good ol' invincibility. I mean, what can I say about it that isn't already in the name? It grants Cuphead invincibility for about 5 seconds. It's a good ability. I guess maybe it could last a little longer, but that's about it. I'd give it a very basic B tier. And last up for Cuphead specials, we have what's probably the most unique one, the Giant Ghost. The super has you summon in a roided out version of your soul. After flexing its muscles, it spins around hitting everything its fists come in contact with, while moving in whatever direction you're facing. It's basically the best of both supers to come before it. The high DPS of Energy Beam, with the added movement of invincibility. It does take a bit of strategy to use, seeing as you have to keep it on your target while still avoiding attacks, but if you can pull that off, then it's definitely worth using. A tier. Moving on from Cuphead specials, next up we have Miss Chalice's 3 new specials added along with her in the DLC. And yes, while these are all different from Cuphead's, they all retain attributes from their parallels. First up is her Screen Wipe, the Spiral Pillar. This one is basically the same as the Energy Beam, stopping you in place, giving you brief invincibility, and summoning a large, spiral pillar to do high damage. Only this time, it's vertical and goes both up and down, as opposed to Cuphead's, which only goes straight ahead of him. Now, while it's basically the same as Energy Beam, I'm only going to give it an A tier. Reason being that unless it's a boss like Phantom Express, where the enemy is directly above you and you can't really get to their sides, you can just use Cuphead's super instead. Because, let's be honest, it's not exactly hard to just jump up to a boss and hit them from the side. But this is still a good super. Next up, we have Chalice's defense, the Shield Pal. In what's probably the most out there super animation, Chalice's head turns into a giant heart, spits out her original head, and proceeds to turn into a little shield with wings that follows her around. I love this game. The shield acts as a second hit point. Now, while this is a good ability on its own, you already spawn in with an extra hit point as Chalice, and even then, with charms like Twin Heart and Heart Ring, Cuphead's just a better option health-wise at least. So while it's not bad per se, it's just kinda unnecessary. C tier. Sorry. And last up are spirit-based attacks, and what is easily Chalice's best special, the Ghostly Barrage. Having Chalice revert to her ancient form to call upon her fellow warriors for a screen-flooding, enemy incinerating barrage. It also summons in a small parryable spear where the attack was initiated. Not only does this special do a lot of damage, not only does it last for like an eternity, but it also follows you as you move up and down. This thing is an absolute spectacle to behold, both visually and gameplay wise. Free S tier for this glorious ability. And now, with all the heavy hitters out of the way, let's wrap up this ranking with some extra weapons. First off, the plane weapons. The darts are your primary fire when in plane mode. Small projectiles that actually do really good damage. Like, the health of the plane bosses are actually some of the highest in the game, at least compared to the ground bosses. But yeah, it's basically the pea shooter, except you can't aim it, which would make it a D tier. However, because its intended use is for plane levels, and you don't really have any other options, it's going to be getting a very solid A tier. Speaking of other options, you also have Cuphead's bombs, which are much more similar to the lobber than the pea shooter. But despite that fact, these are very useful, and that goes double for fights like Esther Winchester and Wally Warbles. They do have a slower fire rate than the darts, but they also have a higher DPS, so if you can use them, use them. This one is also going to be getting an A tier. It's very fairly balanced. Higher damage than the darts, but slower fire than them as well. Moving on to Chalice, they did actually give her different plane weapons, which really goes to show the level of detail the devs put into the DLC. First up is the triple darts. Basically the exact same as Cuphead's darts, just a slower fire speed and wider spread. Nothing I can say here that I didn't already say about Cuphead's darts, another A tier. However, this next one is different. The grenades are going to be going into S tier. You might be wondering how they're any better than Cuphead's. Well, not only do Chalice's bombs have a higher DPS than Cuphead's, but there's also another thing, maneuverability. You can let off 2 or 3 of these things as fast as Cuphead can launch 1, allowing you to get in and out unscathed with some clean damage. Like I said, S tier. Whew. Okay, just a few more and we'll be out of here. The Planes EXs are effective. Who would have guessed? Cupheads consist of the Chompers and the Magnets. Chompers first though. Basically a mix between the pea shooter and Converged Super. A straight projectile that does incremental damage while being able to pierce targets. Between the two, you're probably going to be using this one more often. You can also get in some really good damage if the boss is more so horizontal than vertical. A tier. Magnets up next, and they're basically a quick barrage of homing missiles. Just in the shape of magnets. And while their damage is decent, at least it's guaranteed damage, so A tier. Hey guys, Editing PK here. So if you look closely, you'll notice that A tier is actually full. Now here's the thing though, I definitely planned this out, and I'm not just completely stupid. So here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna, yeah. Yeah, there, yeah. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Then on Chalice's end of things, you have the homing magnets and the downward missile. When in use, the magnets will fire out doing a little bit of damage, station themselves behind Chalice for a second before finally bursting off into the target. No surprise, but the second launch does way more damage than the first. However, you can hit multiple times with the magnets on the first launch, seeing as they bite the target. But yeah, much like the others, it's just a good ability. I'll give it a B tier though, simply because the next one is just better. And that next one is the downward missile. It is exactly what it sounds like. It's the exact same as Cuphead's missile, but it goes down instead. But even if there's nothing new to say about it, that doesn't bring it down in quality. So it's going to be getting an A tier. Alright, that's it. We're done, right? Well, not yet. If you take a closer look at the thumbnail of this video, you'll see that there's still one weapon unaccounted for. And what is that weapon? Well, it's the only charm on this list. Whetstone. Whetstone is a weird weapon. Not that it's confusing, I mean gameplay wise it's very simple. It turns your first parry into an attack. However, it's weird in the sense that in comparison to the others on this list, and even the other charms, it's certainly a standout choice. Now while it does decent damage, I ask you this. Does anyone actually use Whetstone? I mean, Cuphead has ranged attacks for a reason, and by the time you decide, I've used exclusively Smoke Dash for this entire playthrough, maybe I should try out Whetstone, your brain is probably already used to the rule of parry pink, avoid other colors. And sure, if all you want is the ability to parry anything, then this will satisfy your needs. But even then, if you really want a melee attack, then just use the Chaser or Charge EX shot. The only time this is a good option is with the Divine Relic, and even then, that thing is the combined power of 3 charms anyway. So, sorry to all the 4 Whetstone fans out there, but I'm gonna have to give it a D tier. Good for a challenge run, but not much else. Hey, so Editing PK here again, and if you look carefully, you'll notice that the title is ranking every weapon, and I forgot the plain nukes. Let's just put both of those in S tier. It's August 27th, 9:37 p.m. I literally have like 4 days to get this video out, and I cannot re-record it. So, and there it is. For real this time. My final tier list of all the weapons in Cuphead. Kinda sucks we had to end on such a low note, but at least there's more good than bad on this list. Hope y'all enjoyed this ranking. If you want to see more videos like this, then be sure to leave a like and drop a comment to let me know. I'd also love to see you guys' opinion on this list. Should something have been higher, lower? Let me know. But anyways, that's going to do it for me. Potato peace out, and I will see you guys next time.